Hello and welcome to one more exciting event of Sitecore User Group India. We have Martin Davies today with us who is going to present about Sitecore Tracking Field. Martin is consultant developer at Kagool and he is Sitecore MVP. With close to decades experience in digital, he now works exclusively with Sitecore. Martin is also active contributor to Sitecore community and he keeps sharing his Sitecore skills via sitecoreskills.blogspot.com. So first of all, thank you, Martin, for getting some time for Subin. And if you have any question throughout the session, you can tweet it at SUG India. We will get back to you at the end of the session. So let's see what Martin has today for us. Martin, over to you.
Thanks, guys. Hi to everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. As the guys said,
वॉइस लॉस्ट है पूछना मार्टिन ने
Hello? Martin, we are unable to hear you.
hi guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great, okay. Hi everyone. My name is Martin Davis. I'm a consultant developer at Kagool and I've been working with Sitecore for a little over 3 years now. I'm also a Sitecore MVP. I'm always on Twitter talking about Sitecore, so you can get hold of me in that way. Just search for me. I'm 20go to 10, or just search for the hashtag Sitecore, and it won't be long before you track me down. So I've got to apologise up front because I've got a bit of a cough and a cold today, so I'm going to do my best to not deafen you by coughing and sneezing all the time, but yeah, so I'll try and avoid that, but if I do, I apologise and I'll try and mute myself whenever that happens. So let's get started. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Let me know give me a shout if you can't see that. Okay, so this presentation is called Free the Sitecore Tracking Field. I've been doing it a few times over the last few months. I first did it in November to an audience in London, and they seemed to enjoy it, and I really wanted to share it with as many people as possible. So really, it's the story of how we changed our approach to content categorization at Kagool. We used to do it one way. We moved gradually to a new way of working, but I don't want you to think that we invented this overnight. It's something that we initially did to address a specific problem to the way our customers wanted to handle categorization. And over time, it sort of evolved into something else to the point where now we actually use it as the basis for a kind of personalized automation. So it's something that I find quite exciting, and hopefully you will do too. So when I said there was a way that we used to do content categorization, what do I mean by that? So normally this is how we used to do content categorization. Hopefully it's something that you're all familiar with. It's very simple Sitecore items that we put into a list. So for example, we used to have things like a category like segmentation, and then under that we'd put some very basic Sitecore items as children that we would use as the data source for a multilist field. So the way that would work, these items generally, for example, would never have any fields on them. They're literally just there to be items to be selected in multilist, which you can then later on use to look up that item. So for example, here we've got this segmentation multilist field. and we've selected heritage and tourism and media and entertainment. So what that means in this case is that those two tag items have been added as a category to this piece of content, so that we can then go and look up that item. Any of the other items on the left hand side, like financial services, healthcare and education, that sort of thing, they haven't been selected, so they're not in this category. So that's how we used to do things. So the way they'd be used, for example, is you might have a case study. You might want to get all the case study items that have a financial services selected as a category. So the way you do that is say, give me the case studies root item, go through all the children, check the segmentation field, and if the financial services ID is in there, then pull out those items because they're related to financial services. In more recent times, that you'd probably do that with a search. So you do a query of type case study and get the segment property where it contains financial services ID. So there's two approaches to use that multi-field to get a list of case study items. So as I said, this is the way we used to categorize content. Why don't we do that anymore? Well, the answer is quite simple. 2 or 3 years ago, we started using DMS properly. If you're not familiar with DMS content profiling, then I recommend that you really do get into it. The way it works is that it's essentially a big part of DMS. It's used for behavioral profiling, it's used for personalization and all that good stuff that DMS gives you. So it's really quite important. So on the screen at the moment, the example you can see is I've set a profile up in DMS called segmentation. That profile has a number of different profile keys, as we call them. So financial services, heritage and education. Those profile keys are all assigned a range, a minimum and maximum value. In this case, it's 0 to 10. And then every piece of content within your site can be scored against that profile by one or more keys. So for example, I might say, here's an example here, that my homepage is 5 out of 10 for legal and accounting, 5 out of 10 for manufacturing and distribution, and 10 out of 10 for retail. So the homepage is more about retail than it is about the others. That's a really powerful way of working because it means that you can score every piece of content at a really granular level. So that's great. So where exactly was the problem? Why did we need to change the way that we do categorization? Well, I've shown you two lists so far, and they look extremely similar. What we were finding is that when we started using DMS, that the lists that we were setting up for categorization looked very similar, if not identical, to the lists that we were setting up of profiles and profile keys. So in this example, on the left hand side, you've just got these list of tag items. On the right hand side, we've got a profile, and the items inside those two lists are identical. We've got a couple of extra things for the profile, but that's just because it contains more information anyway. But they are very similar, as I said. So as developers, we're fine with that because we understand that these two lists have very different purposes. The tag items, we use them for searching for content and for identifying relationships between different content items. So like those queries that I showed you earlier, we can pull out different items based on those categories. Profiles are for a completely different purpose altogether. They're for scoring content against the different keys, and they allow us to get a picture of a visitor to the site based on their viewing habits. So as they travel around the site, they're accumulating scores, and we'll start to see the trends that are occurring, and that'll give us an idea of what they're interested in. Now, as I said, as developers, we're fine with that because we understand those two different purposes. But for a user of Sitecore, they don't see it that way. As far as they're concerned, they are being asked to perform the same task twice, which obviously doesn't go down well with them. They don't want to do that. Sitecore is supposed to be an efficient system, and they shouldn't have to do the same thing twice for every single piece of content. So we decided to take on that problem, and we wanted to see if there was a way that we can just manage one list. We can do away with one of the lists and just manage that, and then the other one isn't a problem. So what I thought I'd do is, if we return back to the properties of those two lists that we were looking at a minute ago. Can we drop one of these lists? So the tag items, they're simply used for ID, and they're used to establish relationships between items. The profile, it contains scoring data, and it's essential for making use of DMS. So that tells me that we can't get rid of profiles because they're essential to the way DMS works, and they also contain more information than the tag items. So if we were trying to find a way to reduce the amount of work that a user has to do, I would get rid of the tag items. So profiles win. So how do we go about that? So how is the information that's related to a profile and the scoring data on an item, how is that stored? Well, it's the tracking field, so I had to get to it eventually. This is what the tracking field looks like that appears on every single Sitecore item. The tracking field is XML, as you can see. It stores all the information about the profile scoring that's occurred for an item, and but it's not very usable to us in this state in terms of using it for categorization and that sort of thing. It's too complex. The data would just not work in an efficient way. So what we had to do was find a way of perhaps manipulating this data or converting it into something that we could use in a way that would work in a fast and efficient way. And this is what we came up with. So this is the same XML we were just looking at, but this time I've highlighted the information that we're interested in. So if earlier we were talking about categories, now I'm looking at these and say, well, how can I pick out the categories? So let's go through each section of the XML altogether. So you can see that this node represents a profile called segmentation, and within that there's a number of keys, and those keys have a name and a value. So those are interesting. We can make use of that data. So the first key in the segmentation profile has not been assigned a value at all. So that's the equivalent in our old way of working of saying it's not in the category. On the other side, we could say that healthcare and education and heritage and tourism have both been assigned a value, which means it is in the segmentation category. We've got another profile which is called season. Some keys in that: winter, which again has no value associated with it, so that's not a category. So winter is not a category for this content item. And then we have summer and spring, which both have been assigned a value. Now, while I'm talking here, I realize that I'm saying that things are in and out of a category. I based that on being not zero. So these two keys, winter and financial services, are not considered a category, whereas the other ones that have been assigned any value are in a category. That is the threshold that I've decided to set, but you could easily say that anything, this is a scale from 1 to 10, so we could say that anything over 5 is in, everything under is out, or you could say, I don't know, that everything over 50% of the maximum value is in or out. But for the purposes of this, I'll just say that anything that has been assigned score anything over 0 is in the category. So that's great. This is the conceptual approach that we'll take to adding things in and out of a category. But how do you do that in Sitecore? Well, the solution that we came up with was to use computed fields. If you're not familiar with computed fields, they are, as the heading says, a way to trick your indexes into thinking items have an extra field. So what do we mean by that? So when Sitecore is crawling through your items to add data to the index, Sitecore supplies the index with a number of fields, and what you can do is you can actually pretend an item has an extra field, and you can calculate the value of that field at runtime and pass it to the index. As far as your index is concerned, it's just a field like any other that's on the item. But we know better. We know that we're actually working out its value at the point that we're inserting the data into the index. So let's create a computed field to fake the multilist that we started with. So the old style of tagging content to create categories. Let's create a fake multilist from the data that's in the tracking field. So I realized that, okay, so this code, it may be a bit small to see on the site. I've got a couple of slides with these. So what I'll do is I'll actually show it to you directly from Visual Studio. Okay, so hopefully that's big enough for you to see. So this is what the code for a computed field looks like. It inherits from iComputed index field, and because of that, it includes a few properties and a method that you have to include. That method compute field value passes in an iIndexable, which almost always, in normal circumstances, is a Sitecore item. We convert that iIndexable into a Sitecore item, cast it into an item, and then for what we're going to do now, we pull out the tracking field. So that's what the tracking field looks like in Sitecore. It's got 2 underscores before it. So once we have that field, luckily, Sitecore has a helpful class called tracking field. So you can insert the field into a tracking field object and then use the strongly typed properties on that. So what I'm going to do is, for that tracking field, I'm going to loop through all the profiles. Once I've done that, I'm going to loop through each key in each profile and find out whether it's been assigned a value. So if the value of each key is 0, then we add it to our list of keys. So all I'm doing here is actually adding the name of each key to a list of strings. So once we have all those, we can return them, and all that stuff will then get added into the index. So for this example here, I'm actually inserting the key, but I believe this has a profile key definition ID, so you can actually add in the GUID of the profile key item in Sitecore. So that's really simple. That's our DMS profile key field. So let's see how we register that in Sitecore. So I'm going to show you how to register it for if you're using Lucene. There's an equivalent if you're using Solar, but we're not going to go too in depth with this, so I'll just show you for Lucene. So there's 2 places that we need to add this. The first is that you need to register DMS profile keys, which is what we just created, as a field. There's a bunch of configuration to do with this. If you're interested in computed fields, I recommend that you look this stuff up. But all you really need to know that now is that we're creating a field in Sitecore, in our Sitecore item called DMS profile keys. And that we're telling Sitecore how which analyzer should be associated with it. So further on down in this index configuration file, we can see a section for computed fields. So again, I've created a reference for DMS profile keys, which is our computed field, and you can see that I've passed in the class name that of what we just created, the computed field class that we just created. And that's really all you need to do. Next time that you do a publish or anything that causes an item to update the index, Sitecore will read that field as if it was just part of your item. So that's great. That's effectively all we need to do. So I think it's about time that we had a little bit of a demo. I've got a Sitecore site set up. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. So okay, so we're in Sitecore now, and what I've done is created a new website that has a bunch of movie items. Now these movie items have all been assigned a score. So you can see the different items that I have. If I go and look at the DMS information, the scoring information for an item, you can see that I've assigned, this one is been assigned age group for early teen is 1, late teen is 2, adult is 4. So this film is more geared towards adults. And then if we look at another profile, we can see that this is genre. So this particular film has been given a 5 out of 5 for drama, 5 out of 5 for romance, but nothing for any of the other profile keys. So that I think was Gone with the Wind. Let's have a look at another film that's nothing like Gone with the Wind. We'll try Alien. Look at the DMS information for that. So for the age group for Alien, we have nothing for children, obviously, because it's quite an adult film. Late teen, we've we said that there might be some, and then the highest score is for adult. And then the genre for Alien, we have 1 for action. The first film is quite a quiet film. There's a bit of action in it, but it's mostly horror, drama, and science fiction and thriller. So it scores highly against those, and only a very little against action, and nothing against comedy, nothing against crime, or any of the other genres. So what I did, I went through all of these films. There's about, I think, 20 or 30 here, and I scored them against the genre profile, and I scored them against the age group profile. So what I'm going to show you now is the website that we've used. So that computed field that we talked about has been assigned to this site. So when I published these movies, what happened was, although I've got the tracking data, which let's see if I can see that. Where are you? Well, I can't find the tracking data at the moment, but it's down in those sort of standard fields. But anyway, so let's look at our site. So it's a stripped down version of Netflix. You can see hopefully along the top of the page that we've got our genre profile keys. Action, comedy, crime, drama, horror, musical, romance, science fiction, and thriller. So going back to our computed field, what would have happened is when we published each of our movies, we would have pulled out all the profile keys that had been assigned a value, and we would have effectively created a multi-list field where all the genres that movie was in are part of that category. So let's try this out. I'm going to click on one of the links, action for example, and so we can see all the films that had any score that was associated with action. I'll show you a couple more. We have comedy. Each of these have been given 1 or above for comedy. Crime, just go through all of them for you. Drama, horror, musical, romance, science fiction, and finally thriller. So that's good stuff, right? All we're doing here is we're at the top, we're passing in the name of the profile key. You probably can't see that, but I've got a query string that just says thriller at the moment and musical. So all we're doing is saying to the index, give me every item that has been tagged with musical. So what have we done here? Effectively, we've achieved our goal. We've converted data that's used for scoring, and still is because I'm accumulating scores as I go around the site with DMS, but also I'm able to use them as if they were tags. So I've done, as I said before, I've done this presentation a couple of times now, and the question that I've been asked both times is, does it scale well? Well, as I've said several times, this is, as far as the index is concerned, this is just a multi-list field. It doesn't work in any other way different. You just do a search as if it was a multi-field. That said, if you are concerned about the performance of this and how it will scale, there are a few things that you can do. So you can reduce the amount of data that actually gets indexed. So how would you do that? Well, I mentioned it briefly before. You can vary the threshold at which data is included in the index. So, for example, you could say, as what I did for my example was I said anything that has been assigned a score 1 or above gets included in the index, but you could easily say anything that's 3 or above, or whatever number works for you. Another approach is that you could use a percentage of the maximum value. So you could say, if this item has been assigned this key value, a value that is 50% or more of the maximum that it's allowed to be, then allow it in as a category. Otherwise, don't. Or you could set it at 25 or 75, whatever works for your situation. Or you could use some rules-based system where you run a rule at the point of indexing and say, should this item be included in the index for whatever reason. So another thing that you can do to reduce the amount of data that actually gets included in the index is to restrict the profiles that get included. So in my example, I included both genre and age group. But you don't have to do that. You could equally just say, well, my computed field should ignore age group and only include genre. And that way, just in general, less information is included in the index. So now we can use profile keys as if they were tag items. Essentially, this is mission accomplished. This is what we were looking to do. We were looking to dispose of one of those lists and use the other list for both purposes, and that's what we've achieved. But that's not all. There's more. Now that we've done this information, I just want to go back quickly to the demo site, and let's have a look at this information. You can see that although we did our search as if they were tags, there's more information in the DMS tracking field than just tags. So we were able to sort the data descending. So you can see musical here, that the Lego movie has a 1 for musical, and Phantom of the Opera has 5. Sorry, so Phantom of the Opera has 5. So and that goes across the board. So science fiction, The Terminator and Star Wars get a 5. Little Shop of Horror gets a 2, because it's fair to say that Terminator and Star Wars are more science fiction than Little Shop of Horrors. Um, so that's quite a simple thing. We're just sorting that data. But what does that actually mean for what we want to do? Well, actually, there's there's some quite interesting stuff that we can do with this. So I just want to show you the code that we used to sort that information. Okay, so here's the code. Actually, let's show it from Sitecore. So here's what we did. I've got some information here about sorting the results. So uh, this example, what we're doing is we're passing in some Sitecore items. We're passing in a key name, and then we're saying return those items in the order descending that they were scored by that key. So let's have a look at how it's doing that. So for each one of those, it's getting the profile key value. So we're going to the item, we're getting the tracking field. We're instantiating a copy of that tracking field. So we're instantiating the tracking field, and this time we're able to look at all the profiles, find the profile that we're interested in, and if we find a match, then we can return its value. And using that, we can get that for all the items in the list and return them in descending order. And that's how we were able, on the page just a minute ago, to show them with Terminator first and Little Shop of Horrors at the end. So I don't really think I've made it too clear there, just exactly why that's important. So let's move on to the next slide and say, when we talk about the score that's associated with the key, it might be more beneficial to talk about in terms of its weight or relevance. So Terminator is more relevant to the category science fiction uh, than Little Shop of Horrors or anything that's scored not at all for the science fiction. Um, so why is that important? Well, it's great to be able to do that, but most of those movies are associated with more than one category. So when we were looking at it before, Terminator isn't just science fiction, it's also action, could be considered drama as well. So what would we do if we wanted to search based on two criteria? Well, that's certainly possible. You can search, just like a minute ago we were searching for science fiction, why not search for items that are associated with science fiction and action? Well, that's okay, we can do that, and it would return perhaps fewer results because more results because it's going to return everything for action and everything for science fiction. But more importantly is how do we sort the results? Because now, before we were just sorting uh, based on a single value, but now we're searching for two values and we need to sort based on that. So we need to find a way of getting relevance based on two values. And if we extend that concept a bit further, if we look at all the profile keys that have been assigned a value for an item, then we want to know how to sort it based on all of those in comparison to another item. So really what the issue is here is how do we find a way of comparing how close one Sitecore item is to another in terms of all the keys it's been assigned a value to. So you can almost think of it in terms of a dating agency. One Sitecore item is interested in a bunch of different things. Another Sitecore item is interested in another bunch of things. How can we work out how relevant they are to each other? And that, if you can find that relevance, then you can sort by that relevance and find out the best matching item based on another one. So I realize that's quite complex. So let's just see if we can work towards a way of making that clearer. So on the site that we were just looking at, let's go into one of these items and just have a look at its makeup. So zoom out a bit. So we have the Terminator, and this was the detail page for the Terminator. You can see that the Terminator has been assigned values for a bunch of different profile keys: action, science fiction, adult, late teen, thriller. So based on that, we were able to sort them for those different things. So it's mostly about action, and then the lowest is thriller. But we're able to work out how relevant other movie items are to the Terminator. So we can see it's suggesting, okay, if you like the Terminator, why not try these? And based on the movies that we have in the site, the Matrix is the closest match for the Terminator. It's got 5 for action. It's got 5 science fiction, so they're pretty close in that respect. And then there's a bunch of other ones that also contribute to how relevant it is. The second most relevant is Alien, then Star Wars, and then Back to the Future. And that sounds actually pretty accurate to me in terms of, we're not having Grease or a kids movie in there. These are all pretty accurate in terms of how well they've matched. And you can see on the right hand side that we have a relevance score that we've assigned to the Matrix based on its relationship to the Terminator. So the Matrix is 84, Alien 67, and gradually decreasing, and we've sorted by that relevance score. So how have we done this? Let's go back to the presentation. So first of all, the first thing we need to do is get all the scores for an item. So I'll just go back into our code, and here's the code for getting an item's scores. We did something similar to this before. We pass in an item to this method, get item scores. We get the tracking field. If the tracking field's there, because it might not be, then we carry on. We instantiate the tracking field object because it makes life simpler. And then if there are any matched, then we create a list of keys that have been assigned a value, looping through all the profiles of the item and all the keys that are on each profile. If they have value over 0, then we add it into our list and we return them. And what we return is a dictionary of key value pairs, so strings and floats. The float is the score that's been assigned to that particular item. So now that we've got a list of scores and profile keys that have been assigned to each item, we can say, okay, take 2 items and compare them. That's not perhaps as easy as it may seem, but we came up with a way of doing this at Kagool, so I'll just show you. This is what we came up with. So let's look at the Matrix and Terminator. So these, down the left hand side, we have all the profile keys that have been assigned to both those films. And all the scores, and we're multiplying each of those profile keys by each film. So the Matrix has a 5 for action, and so does the Terminator. So 5 by 5 is 25. Thriller. So the Matrix is 3 out of 5 for thriller, and the Terminator is 2, so that gives us 6. And we multiply all these things, and this is how we end up with that number 84. So this is our relevance score that we were referring to earlier. So if I go back to the website just briefly, and you can see that is exactly the number that we ended up with for the relevance between the Matrix and the Terminator. So if we apply that calculation to every single scored item that we've returned, so we do the search first, and then we apply the calculation to all the results. Then we get up with this relevance score that we can sort by. Let's quickly have a look at the relevance calculation. So this is how we do the calculation. We pass in 2 dictionaries of key value pairs, string and float. Notice that I'm not using the actual profile key objects. I'm using dictionaries of string floats. There's a reason for that, and I'll come back to it later. But for the moment, just think of score list 1 and score list 2 as if they were two Sitecore items. So what we do is, we loop through all the scores in score list 1, and we see if that exists in score list 2. So we're looping through everything in the first Sitecore item and checking if it's been assigned a score in the second Sitecore item. If it has, then we multiply those two values. This is what we were doing in the table earlier. And we add it to the relevance score. So we loop through all the scores, and eventually we end up with this relevance number. So that's how in code we achieve what we did a minute ago. But there is a better way than this. This is how when I first wrote this presentation, how we used to do it. I did the presentation a few months ago, and one of the other presenters at the user group, Ehab El-Gindi, he had a better way. He said, okay, I recognize what you're trying to do. There is a better way. It's called cosine similarity. So I went straight on Stack Overflow, and I found what exactly is cosine similarity. I'll show you the page that I found on the internet. I don't pretend that I understand it. Here it is. This is the code. I added it into my Sitecore solution. I have no idea why it works or how it works, but hopefully some of you are mathematicians and you can understand it. I'll zoom in a little bit for you. As I said, I don't pretend to understand the maths behind this, but if you do, then that's great. This works a lot better than the approach that I was just demonstrating. But the unfortunate side is I don't know why it works either, but just trust me, it does. So, as I said, that's the better way, and if you're interested in this subject, I encourage you to go and have a look at this Stack Overflow URL. Why is it a better way? Well, it maintains a consistent scale. So previously, when I had that the score of 84 for the Matrix and the Terminator, that number was not based on any sort of minimum or maximum. It was just multiplying a bunch of values and seeing what came out. Whereas this approach does have a consistent scale. You always get a number that's between 0 and 1. So so it should be, in general, more accurate. So that's great. So we now have a way of sorting a bunch of items against how relevant they are to each other. And I just thought I'd show you a real-world example of this. So, okay, so this is a company called the Hey Group that we built their site. So they have a bunch of pages, and they have these, let's have a look, these panels. So we have this Find Out More section. Each of these panels underneath the Find Out More section, what Sitecore is doing is that it is looking at the current page, looking at the scores that have been assigned to the current page. Then it's doing that search that we looked at earlier, pulling out everything that's related to the current page and then sorting it by its relevance. So we can be pretty sure that based on the current page, this is the next most relevant item in the whole of the site to this page. And this is the second and the third and the fourth in that order. These are the most relevant pages based on the current one. We've not selected anything manually here. This is all being calculated at runtime. So as I said, all being calculated at runtime, but is that a good thing? We asked before, does it scale? And originally the previous solution did scale, but now we've added an extra layer of complexity. First we do our search and then we perform this calculation. So that's obviously more labor intensive. So again, we can reduce the amount of data that gets indexed using the methods that I talked about before, just increase that threshold or those other options. We can also reduce the search criteria. So let's say on our movies website that we have uh, the we have 10 profile keys that have been assigned score. What I could say is, okay, I'll just take the top 3 of those and search for those, and that would that would necessarily return less results in the first place. So you're reducing your result set that you then have to apply the calculation to. The other thing is that that tracking field class that I was demonstrating before, that's great for this small example where I've only got 20 or 30 movies on the site, but if I had thousands, that wouldn't work. What we found was that that tracking field class is quite slow when you're instantiating several of them. Um, so what we found is that if we parse the XML from the tracking field directly, then it was significantly quicker. So an example that I'll show you later, when we use the tracking field object, uh, a typical page would take about 10 seconds to load. After we started parsing the XML dynamically, or manually I should say, then that load time went down to about 100 milliseconds. So there's a significant saving in not using that tracking field object. It's just for this demonstration, it's convenient. And the other thing is that you can cache your components. So this calculation doesn't need to be run every time that you ask for a page or ask for a component. It's going to be the same every time until you publish any changes to the DMS keys. So you only really need to run it the first time, and after that point, the data can just be, the HTML can be cached. So those are the ways that if you do find that this doesn't scale well, those are some of the solutions that you can have. So we've gone from using it as a search mechanism to just return anything that's tagged. Now we're assigning sorting based on relevance, but there's still further that we can go with this. Um, we've done some good stuff based on comparing 2 items, but I just want to show you what more we can do based on a case study. So we worked with a company called HealthSpan, and they wanted a website called Nutrition Expert. Now, in many ways, they were a dream customer for us because they already knew Sitecore. They were a digitally mature company, and they were fully on board with using DMS. What we find quite often is that customers aren't really at a maturity level where they can really understand DMS and use it to its full potential. But HealthSpan had been using Sitecore a while, and they knew what they were doing. So we wanted to get them using DMS, or at least the scoring, and they were fully on board with that. So what they had for this new nutrition expert website was they had 600 article pages which relate to health and nutrition. And surprisingly, I've never seen this before, they had 120 different profile keys over 3 different profiles. I've never seen that before, and I've never seen another company that wants to categorize that content in such a granular way. But that's what they had. And what the other thing was, they had an appetite for accuracy. So when we talked about scoring, we initially talked about pattern cards, which allow you to, they're sort of like presets, so you can apply scores to multiple keys and multiple profiles in one go. But they didn't want to do that. They wanted to score every single piece of content manually for every, so that's 600 article pages against 120 different profile keys manually, and they wanted to do that. So that's what they did. They scored every piece of content against every profile key. It took a team of about 3 or 4 people, I think, about a week, and they were experts in their field. They had to understand this stuff. It wasn't just sort of, it's complex, it's health information, so it's important for it to be accurate. They didn't want to use pattern cards, as I said, because they thought that would pigeonhole visitors. And they thought, well, we've done all this work of scoring. We spent all that time doing it. why do we now need to go in and assign rules and data sources and all that kind of stuff? Surely there's something that we can do to just automate that process. We want to personalize content for people, but we don't have to want to say, okay, I've added I've added 3 new articles this week, so I have to go through all my data sources and change all the data sources that will relate for the personalization because I've added a bunch of new articles. That was going to be far too labor intensive for them, so they charged us with coming up with a solution, which we thought might be impossible, but no, actually, the stuff that we've seen during this presentation so far, we pretty much already have all the code that we need to achieve it. So let's have a look at that code, what we came up with. So, okay, so before we've looked at comparing 2 Sitecore items, but if you remember, I was very keen to talk about key value pairs and not Sitecore items. And why that was important to talk about strings and float dictionaries rather than Sitecore item is because your visit as a Sitecore user is essentially a list of profile keys and scores. As you travel around the site, you're accumulating the scores against different profile keys, but essentially that can be transferred into a dictionary of string floats just like a Sitecore item could earlier. So let's just have a look how you do that. So this will look very similar to before because, like I said, it's very similar. What we do is we say get the scores for the current visit. So we get a list of scores, an empty list of scores. We loop through all the profiles that have been accumulated during the current visit. Once we have those, we loop through all the profile values, and then we get all of them that have a score greater than 0. So for my visit, I can get a list of all the scores. So that's good. So now, rather than comparing 2 Sitecore items, I could compare my visit against every item in Sitecore and say, okay, based on my visit, give me the most relevant items. So that sounds very similar to the kind of things that you get on Netflix and Amazon and things of that type you may be interested in. So that's great. Let's give that a go. I'm going to go back to the website that we were just looking at, the demo site. Here we are. So let's just go around this site for a few seconds. So I probably lost my session since the last time, but let's start it again. So first of all, I've shown that I'm interested in the Terminator. So, okay, now you've suggested to me that I might like the Matrix. I'm going to go into that as well. It's also suggesting some other things. So, okay, I like the Terminator and I like the Matrix. I may be interested in Star Wars as well. So, as I go through the site, I'm accumulating all these scores that are associated with every one of the sites. So, I have something that I can show you. So, here's my personal recommendations. So, these are the scores that I've accumulated on my traveling around the site. Science fiction 15, action 14, adult 11, and so on. Romance least. So based on that, these are the most relevant pages on the site for me personally, not related to each other, but for me personally. The site thinks that the Matrix is something I like the best, then Terminator and Star Wars, and then all the way down to something like the Lego Movie. So this is really rather powerful. So these are personal recommendations. I can't really emphasize that enough that this is happening on the fly. If I change my mood and I decide that suddenly I'm interested in musicals more than science fiction like I was before, so we'll go with Greece, then my recommendations are going to change. So, okay, so Matrix is still seen as my favorite, but now we've got some things that weren't on the list before. Grease, Gone with the Wind, Shawshank Redemption has entered. Now, I haven't even looked at the Shawshank Redemption page, but it's in my list as something that I may like. So this is really useful. These are the relevance scores on the right hand side. And as I said, if we were using the more efficient method that I was recommended, then this would always be a number between 0 and 1. So that's interesting. But we'll go back to the same old question. Uh, Sorry, no, I'll just show you the Nutrition Expert website because obviously this was the example I was giving before. So this is Nutrition Expert that we talked about before. I said that they had 120 different 120 different profile keys. They're actually output onto the site. So these are the profile keys. I don't know if you can see that. So there really are a lot, and they've scored every single article against every single one of these, a number between 0 and 10. So I'm going to quickly go around the site and go to some articles. So lose weight, and I may then after that go to eating disorders. So already I've started to express certain interests, and you can see you may be also interested in. This is the component that's actually doing the relevance tracking that I was just explaining to you. So based on what I've looked at so far, these are the most relevant other pages on the site. So I'm filtering out the ones I've already looked at, but the remaining pages, these are the ones that are most relevant. So you can see that it's not really very accurate yet, but as I go through the site, if I still look at things to do with eating, then over time I will gradually be recommended more things that are to do with eating related activities or eating related articles. And then halfway through, if I change my mind and say, okay, I'm not interested in that anymore, I'm interested in something completely different, then the recommendations will also start to match what I've started looking in. So there may be at one point where it's recommending stuff that's halfway between both the things I've been looking at. That's different to the traditional way of Sitecore personalization, where you're pigeonholed into one pattern card or another. This is taking a far more granular approach and just saying, okay, you're not one thing or another, you're a mixture of the two. On a site like this, that might be really powerful because, for example, if I started first looking at ailments that I'm currently experiencing, and I think that they're completely unrelated ailments, but it might be that there's an article on the site that actually is very relevant to both of those, and it may be able to almost diagnose a health condition that I have, or recommend a supplement that will help me for both. So it can be really powerful. But then there's the age-old question: does it scale? Okay, so this is the most labor-intensive of all the things that we've done before. Before we talked about caching, and we said that we could just cache the HTML. That won't work anymore because we're actually doing the calculation every time, because every page I go to I change my personal visit scores and the calculation needs to be run again. So it can be quite labor intensive, especially if you've got perhaps a few hundred articles to process. But there are things that you can do. Again, as we talked about before, you can reduce the amount of data stored, reduce the search criteria, and then perhaps a third thing that's most useful in this case is because that might take a little bit longer, we can make that component on the page that does that calculation run asynchronously, so the rest of the page can load first, and then perhaps it can give you your recommendations afterwards. Yeah. So we've achieved simple personalization without rules. So to be clear about what this is, we've circumvented the whole process of assigning rules, pattern cards, data sourcing for the purposes of personalization, and now Sitecore is doing it on the fly without any intervention for us. This worked really well for Healthspan and Nutrition Expert because they had so much information that they were willing to individually score, and I suppose that's the situation where it works best. So, in summary, what have we done? So, first of all, we took the data that was used that scored against Sitecore item for profiles, and we used them as if they were search tags in the old style of categorization. After that, we thought, okay, well, we can use the scoring information against those tags to sort the content and find the information that's most relevant to the current page. And then after that, we extended that idea even further by saying, okay, now give me all the information that's most relevant to me personally. Okay, so that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. But before I finish up, I wanted to recommend some articles. So we have the top two here are two articles that introduce the idea of searching for information that's in profile cards. This first one, using DMS in your Sitecore 7 search, by Ian Graham. That's a colleague of mine. He introduced this topic in a blog post a couple of years ago. And also Jeremy Davies wrote using DMS profile cards as search metadata quite some time ago as well. And in that, he actually talks about, I think, parsing the XML manually rather than using that tracking field like I did, which I said is more efficient. The third item in the list is IA Sitecore Integrating Machine Learning by Mark Stiles. This is a great presentation about personalizing content based on machine learning, and not using rules and data sources like I was. He takes a very different approach, and it's far more sophisticated than what I've been talking about, so I definitely recommend taking a look at that. And then the final one, which is kind of unrelated, but it's the Missing Standard Values Pipeline by Sean Kearney. It's another YouTube presentation that you can watch. In my examples, I've been using a computed field. I'm not entirely sure that is the best approach. It means that all the data that you actually want to use is in the index and is almost a little bit divorced from Sitecore. So I watched this presentation a few weeks ago, and I thought that it was really relevant to this. What he talks about is basically pipelinizing standard values and dynamically populating that standard value. So we could take the concepts that we've done here and actually store that data in Sitecore as a standard value. As I said, it's not something that I've done, but it's definitely an alternative approach to using a computed field. So that's it, I'm done. It's time for some questions and some feedback. Don't just want questions, I'd like to know whether you like these ideas. Also, do you have a way that you think they could be better implemented? And also, what other applications do you think you can have? I've only talked about personalization and relevance based on 2 pages, but if you've got any other ideas that you could say, okay, well, there's other things that are actually lists of key value pairs as well that could be used for this, then yeah, I'd like to hear about it. You can contact me on Twitter, as I mentioned before. Also, there's my blog, or you can contact me through Kagool. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much for sharing such detailed insights of Sitecore Tracking Field. It was really awesome.
Thanks very much.
And we believe that this will definitely help Sitecore community in their DMS journey. Let us check if we have any questions got for you.
Yeah, we have a question, and sort of you currently answered a part of it. We have a question from Jonathan Robbins. He says, what other applications do you think the tracking field could be used for beyond categorization?
Well, I was hoping you could tell me that, but I suppose one thing we've looked at before is that I'm not sure how many people would want to use this, but I've seen it used sort of like for applying security roles. If a Sitecore item is in one has been assigned a certain score for a profile, then only people who have a certain role can see that item. That's another way it could be used. I suppose there are some security concerns with that, but it's certainly another option.
Right. Sure. Uh, Sure. So, Martin, that's it. We had just one question regarding the presentation, and really thank you for spending time and getting this presentation ready for the Sitecore User Group India, and again taking time and presenting it to the community. Thank you so much, and thank you Sitecore users for joining us today and you know getting insights about how to free the Sitecore tracking field. Uh, Martin, one thing specifically, the examples that you gave were awesome. I mean, they were very simple to understand, and I think they, in a way, provide us a power to use the Sitecore DMS and empower our users. So, really, thank you so much for that.
I'm glad you found it helpful.
Yeah,
I'll also share the slides with the community. I'll send them to you guys, and then you can distribute it however you like as well.
Yeah, sure.
sure. Thanks for that. And if Sugin viewers, if anybody would like to present about the your Sitecore journey or Sitecore experience, then you can definitely give us the tweet at hash SUG India. We are waiting for your Sitecore experience to help the Sitecore community, just like just like Martin has given the example of his Sitecore journey of the tracking field, which was really helpful. So stay tuned with us, and thank you, Martin. Thanks a lot again.
Thank
And
you.
as the horizontal India team, and specifically Kiran says, it's good to be the Sea of Galilee rather than the Sea of Dead Sea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you all for joining. Thanks, Martin, for the presentation. Sitecore users, see you back. See you again next time in the next month's Sugir event. Bye for now.
Thank you.